Invest Johor, the key agency driving investment in Johor, has been instrumental in facilitating DC application. Ladies and gentlemen, here to share Johor's economic plans and potential as the future of Shenzhen of Malaysia, please welcome Encik Agni Jabdadin bin Ahmad.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good afternoon. The organizer told me that, you're going to break for lunch after this. So I hate to be the person standing between you and your lunch. I'll make it very fast and, sweet and short. Anyway, I'm representing my Chief Executive Officer of Invest Johor, Tuan Haji Nataza, who, cannot make it for today's session. Before I proceed with my presentation, Invest Johor is a state government agency mandated by the state government to look after or to promote Johor. And honestly, today I'm wearing state government officer hat. I'm wearing two hats, just for information, because at the same time, I'm also the Senior Vice President for Iskandar Regional Development Authority, a federal government agency. So I've been seconded to Invest Johor since May to assist Invest Johor or the state in promoting state of Johor when it comes to investment. So I would like to start my presentation this afternoon with a little trivia. I think, do you know that Johor and Singapore, the border crossing, the land crossing, is actually the busiest crossing in the world, right? So the point is there is a need for us to really have a good economic and working relationship between Johor and Singapore. Hence, I think the MC mentioned about the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. I'm very sure majority of the attendees today would like to know more about Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. But my presentation is pretty much a typical sales presentation, selling Johor. So there are two ways we can do this. It's either we go straight to Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone, or we can just, just pretend macam kita go through sikit lah the presentation to justify my presence here. Okay, quickly on on Johor. Welcome to Johor. I'm quite sure majority of us here in Johor, are from Johor. So 19,000 square kilometers, a lot of land to be developed. There's a lot of opportunities, with about 3 million people working. But majority of the economic activity actually is happening on the down south, all right, particularly in the area of Iskandar, Malaysia. I'll take you through at a later stage, explaining about Iskandar, Malaysia. Okay, these are the thrusts of our current or existing state government. The mantra or the theme of our current state government. I'm not going to touch all 6. The focus here is on item number 5, economic development. So I will leave the rest, the Yang Amat Berhormat Menteri Besar to explain. So as you all aware, I think that our Yang Amat Berhormat Menteri Besar is very passionate when it comes to economic development for the state of Johor. There's a lot of initiative, really hands-on, on the ground, pushing for, the state of Johor in the eyes of the world. So, and thank God, I think now Johor, a lot of attention has been given on Johor, the spotlights on Johor. I think MDEC also is instrumental in, contributing in the investment development in the state of Johor. For record, from Malaysia perspective, 2023 was a record numbers, 329 billion worth of investment recorded. All right. Of course, majority of the investment coming from Singapore, Netherlands, the USA, and whenever I give the presentation, providing these figures, I often receive inquiry or question, why Netherlands? Such a small nation, but they have a huge investment when it comes to, in Malaysia. Actually, in the Netherlands, the numbers are not purely the Netherlands company. It's not the Dutch company, right? Because they are tax haven country. quite a number of European nations will, go through Netherlands to do the investment. Hence, we can see Netherlands is top. Okay, I can say that at the moment in the state of Johor, everything looks in a way fine when it comes to, from economic perspective, when it comes to our investment numbers, our trade, our what we call this import, export, those numbers are very positive at this point of time. So what you can see here, the approved investment from the manufacturing sectors alone, we continue to receive quite a healthy number. Just a bit of history. Johor has always been our, manufacturing has always been our key industry in the state of Johor since the 80s. But now I think the state government's focus is to really increase or move up the value chain. I think there's a lot of effort being put on because there are few challenges that we are facing at this moment, especially when it comes to talent. Talent has always been a key issue in the state of Johor. Well, this is the numbers from the economy, what we call this services sectors. As I mentioned, our state government, all the ESCOs, the administration, actively going out and promote Johor as the investment destination. These are the boring stuff. I don't want to go through this. All right. Okay. What do we offer in the state of Johor? Actually, if you look nationally, from the whole nation perspective, every state will have their own value proposition. All right. For the state of Johor, we continue to promote our E&E industry, sectors, digital economy. I think the moderator mentioned about the data centers. Of course, we have conflicting views when it comes to data centers. If you talk to TMB, they are very happy because they will increase their earnings, So I heard the panel earlier on discussing in depth about the data center industry in Johor. I just want to give a bit of perspective. I remember one of the questions earlier on, whether it is really a value or is it because of the cost factor that the influx of all this data center. Actually, data center, what we call this investment, it all started back in 2014, 2014, 2015, right? Back then, there is no data center here in Johor except for VETS, if I'm not mistaken, VETS. But from the perspective of the federal government, they want to take it as a national project. So they put a lot of money coming from the federal government, putting up a good infrastructure to attract all this data center. But I remember back then the Blue Project, right? The very first big data center, the Blue Project, but for some reason they scaled down. For your info, it's not a secret anymore. Blue Project actually Microsoft. They scaled down. But the fact that the federal government put in a lot of money to bring up the infrastructure in Sedenak, So coupled with Singapore moratorium, then we start to see, starting from 2019, 2020, then we start to see the influx or the migration of this data center into the state of Johor. All right. Of course, when you talk about data center, we can talk for hours, The state government, of course, feel a bit jittery to a certain extent. I think we talked about the, scarcity of our resources and whatnot. But frankly speaking, from the state of government perspective, we are less worried about electricity. We know, our TMB is in a good position to support the progression of our data center. But of course, people will question about water, all right? So there are certain mechanisms being put in place by the state government at the current point to control term of the data center coming in, and we're also working closely with our federal government agency in the like of MDEC to really filter when it comes to the data center new investment. Right. So coming back to this one, of course, advanced manufacturing, engineering, and logistics. Logistics is very key for the state of Johor. We are the only state, all the borders, actually, we have two shoreline, east and west, the only state in Malaysia. So the contribution or the logistic economic contribution is very great for the state of Johor. Okay, let's touch a bit on Iskandar Malaysia. All right. Traditionally, Johor is just a coke city, coke town, Johor Bahru, before 2006, 2010, 20, in the early 2000. So the people traveling from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur just make a quick stop in Johor Bahru to buy a can of coke. That's quite common. Johorian would know that. So the federal government or the government of the day back then, they come up with a concept of conurbation. The concept of conurbation is not something new. It has been there since the 80s, even before Tun Mahathir's time. We only have 3 conurbation back then in Malaysia. Penang, conurbation Penang, Kuala Lumpur, and of course Johor Bahru. But Johor Bahru is so difficult to take off because the Singapore factor, right? Then come Patlah back in 2006, they decided to have this economic corridor concept. And IRDA or Iskandar Malaysia was the first economic corridor in Malaysia. All right. So for whatever reason, people can have a huge argument in terms of the success or failure of the corridor concept. But whatever that we are having today here in Johor, some credit must go to Iskandar Malaysia. There's a lot of infrastructure being put up, a lot of investment from the federal government to bring the infrastructure and to attract investment into Johor. If I can recall the number rightly, up to December last year, Iskandar Malaysia, they have attracted about 400 billion worth of investment, committed investment into the region. So in the state of Johor, we are quite lucky because we have 2 economic corridors that can, work closely with the federal state government to develop the economy of Johor. We have Eastern Corridor, whereas the other state will only have 1 economic corridor. So Eastern Corridor will cover part Mersing and Segamat. Sorry. And last but not least, our Pengerang. There's a reason why I'm bringing Pengerang to this discussion or this presentation, because you guys you're aware that the federal government made an announcement recently about the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. The area will be Iskandar Malaysia plus Pengerang. All right. Okay, this is the topic of Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. The spirit of Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone is about Shenzhen and Hong Kong. But if you look or study about this subject in totality, it took about 40 years for Shenzhen to be where they are today. And we just launched this last year. All right. And to make things more complicated or interesting, Shenzhen and Hong Kong pretty much share the same government. And in Malaysia, in the context of Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone, we are talking about 2 different governments. So as we speak, or as we having this session today, our federal government and the Singapore government is actively in a negotiation to finalize our definitive agreement. We're supposed to sign the agreement back in September, but there was a bit of pushback. We expect to sign the agreement in December, 8th December this year. All right. So I received quite a number of questions. What's the difference between Iskandar Malaysia and JSSEZ? We have Iskandar Malaysia since 2006. So what's the difference now about JSSEZ? I would like to respond to that kind of question. Iskandar Malaysia is an internal government, our own government initiative. Right? We set up Iskandar Malaysia in the hope to propel the economy of Southern Johor, to close the gap with Singapore. All right? It's just our own doing. But when it comes to JSSEZ, it is an obligation by both governments. It's a G2G. Hence, we have a clear agreement what need to be delivered by both governments. So I personally, honestly, I think this latest initiative will bring about, a new way of doing things between Malaysia and Singapore, coupled with a very healthy and friendly political relationship between Johor or Malaysia and Singapore. So there's a lot of motivation now from both governments. I cannot disclose details of the agreement at this point of time, but one of the areas that they are seriously looking at is the ease of movement of people and goods between Johor and Singapore. So I remember I had discussion with DHL, the country manager, he told me, because he was doing the cross-border, movement of goods. In a week, the declaration of goods, we are talking about 16,800 pieces of paper involved. So you just imagine now we are in the era of IT, but we still cannot solve this problem. So one of the pillars that the GSSEZ work group is working on is to digitalize most of the, what we call these activities involving people and goods movement between Johor and Singapore, right? And these are the sectors that we are going to focus on under Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. And perhaps I can just give a snippet. Part of the agreement is some commitment in terms of number of companies that will move the operation and set up the operation in Johor. So it shows that we are very serious this time around to work closely between Johor and Singapore, and we hope that we can solve a lot of issues. Just now, earlier on, I mentioned about the cross-border. We are talking about 350 to 400,000 commuters daily. So making it the busiest crossing in the world. And we are still requiring our citizen or people surrendering our passport, chop, scan and whatnot. Where Singapore is doing a lot faster. They're now moving on to the QR code. I think our government is working on that. There's a bit of hiccup. This should be able to roll it out very soon. So, and another aspect of JSSEZ is about incentives. Sorry, it's already 1 o'clock. People ask about incentive. I can bet you throughout my presentation, I will not talk about any incentives. Because tomorrow, our Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri will announce the budget. The working team is expecting some kind of announcement tomorrow, something big or some big announcement for the state of Johor, hopefully. I'm not preempting things, but that in relation to our Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. That's why I was telling you guys earlier on, the star, moons, everything is, currently aligning perfectly for the state of Johor. And we should seize and leverage on the current situation, at least for the next 3 to 4 years, so that we can bring our state of Johor to the next level. These are the key initiatives that is in the pipeline that will transform or change the landscape of Johor. Of course, RTS is coming in on the first quarter 2027. The construction progress is following the schedule. And then the QR code clearance I mentioned earlier on, and IMFC Johor. This is very important. Our Yang Amat Berhormat Menteri Besar keep on emphasizing on this IMFC Johor, Invest Malaysia Facilitation Center, because I've been dealing with investment for the past 8-9 years in IRDA, Invest Johor. Quite a number of times you see the foreign investor especially will get themselves confused whenever they enter a new market. They have to deal with so many agencies, As compared to Singapore, we are talking about a single government, and very well structured to a certain extent. But in the case of Malaysia, we are talking about federal government agencies, we are talking about state government agencies, and don't forget, we have another layer of authority, which is the PBT, right? Pihak Berkuasa Tempatan, local authority. So in the eyes of investor who are bringing in billions of ringgit into Johor, they don't want to deal with all this, so many layers of agencies. Hence, the creation of IMFC Johor. And the location has been announced. It's going to be in Forest City. We shall not touch or question why it is in Forest City in this discussion. All right. But it's going to be in Forest City. Okay. And next, Forest City SFZ, Special Financial Zone. The announcement the government made announcement, our MK2, Menteri Keuangan Kedua, made announcement 3 Fridays away, if I'm not mistaken, on the incentive attached to the Special Financial Zone. All right. And of course, Talent Development Council. So all these initiatives prove the motivation from the state government that we want to work closely with Singapore. Let's bring and change the economic landscape for Johor. Of course, these are the assessment pitch. I don't want to go into detail, but one thing I can tell you, we have a strong support from the federal and state government when it comes to positioning Johor in the investment perspective, making Johor attractive to invest. And another key point is the fast track approval. This is something record in the state, even for Malaysia. We have this concept of Johor Fast Lane. I'm not sure how many of you are from in the construction or the consultant. Typically, from the project brief to the to the issuance of CCC will take about 24 to 36 months. That's a typical situation in Malaysia. But under what we call this Johor Fast Lane, we have concluded, we have tested from the project brief to the operation is 12 months, maximum is 14 months. So one of the data center actually in Sedenak is a test case, from the project brief and the submission all the way to the operation is 13 months. So this is something that we are selling to the investors, So IMFC is a concept of putting all the agencies, related agencies under one roof to make sure we work closely. Because under the leadership of Yang Amat Berhormat Menteri Besar Johor, he hates the word working in silo, frankly speaking, So he wants everyone to break all the silos and work together as a team and move forward. So I think the concept of IMFC is something very interesting, and we are presenting this case to the federal government as well. Should this be a successful concept, the other state in Malaysia could follow the same concept. And I think we are mindful of the time. And I just want to touch a bit on our connectivity. What makes Johor very, in a way, successful is because of our good connectivity. We are the only state in Malaysia which have 3 ports. We have PTP, currently ranked number 15 in the world. We have Johor Port, Pasir Gudang, a very old port, our hinterland port. And recently, we have Tanjung Langsat Port. Tanjung Langsat Port has been there for many years, but recently the federal government approved Tanjung Langsat to be another container port in Johor. And of course, we have international airport. I must admit, our international airport is pretty much serving our regional destination in the Southeast Asia. But it is very important for us to take into consideration. But our airport, just for your information, before we break for lunch, how many of you know that our Senai International Airport is the only privatized airport in Malaysia? Not many people know this fact. Whereas the other airports in Malaysia belongs to MAHB. I came from Senai Airport before. I served Tan Sri Syed Mokhtar for many years. It was a difficult project because you are there alone, fighting with big boys, MAHB. So I can understand their limitation when it comes to, expansion of Senai Airport. But you're still here. And of course, the rail network, we expect the RTS and even the double tracking electrified crane system to be fully commissioned by 2026. Well, okay. Just want to touch a bit before I stop here. I mentioned about talent. Honestly, it's very difficult equation when it comes to talent in Johor. We keep on losing our talent to Singapore, not to say on just a general workers, so it's very difficult to find talent in Johor. I just quote you one example. Even my car mechanics, we has been doing the servicing of cars for many years. Last month, I went to the workshop to send for my car for servicing. So the guy said, "No, boss, tak ada, sudah berhenti." Where is he now? He's a gardener in Singapore. The car mechanic, move over to Singapore to work as a gardener. I'm quite sure as a gardener, they receive what, 2,000, 3,000 a month in Sing dollar. So there's a huge challenge for the state of government to manage the situation. All right, but we have to continue to train our talents. Just now, if you can recall, we have the Johor Talent Development Council that, a collaboration between Johor State and federal government to work with all the local and international university to prepare our talent to support the industry. Previously, before 2006, 2007, we can see quite a number of Malaysians sending their children to international school in Singapore. But now we have seen, what we are seeing now is a shift. Every morning if you're standing at the causeway, you can see a different type. Now, quite a number of Singaporeans sending their children to international school in Johor. So because under Iskandar Malaysia, one of the promoted sector is education sector. All right, this is just what we call this a snippet of who has been investing in Johor. We have all the big MNCs, and of course I mentioned about Invest Johor, and as I mentioned earlier on, I did not mention anything about incentives. Number one, because tomorrow there will be announcement on the new incentive, hopefully. Number two, personally, I never believe the incentive is a main criteria for investor to invest in Malaysia. That is my personal view, all right? Why? Because the investor should look at Johor or even Malaysia at their own value proposition rather than incentive. If you keep on fighting for incentive, Vietnam is throwing X number of incentive, Indonesia will throw certain numbers of incentive, it will never end. So what we have to do as a nation, we should bring our value proposition to a level where it's acceptable by the investor. I always believe that, So I know some people might have different perspective. They will say, go to negotiation table, okay? First thing they ask, what is your incentive? So usually I will, I'm quite disheartened to a certain extent when the investor, first thing they will ask is, what is the incentive available for me? You shouldn't be looking from that angle alone. Because incentive is not perpetual, something that, this today government can give, then tomorrow government can pull it back. We have seen that. All right, so MIDA, of course, our national, what we call this IPA, Investment Promotion Agency for the nation. We work closely between MIDA and Invest Johor and IRDA to promote Malaysia as a whole. Of course, MIDA, they have about 20 offices overseas. And then when it comes to to narrowing down to the right destination, then we'll Invest Johor will handhold what we call these investors to make sure that they have a good experience investment journey in the state of Johor. With that, I thank you. Shall we go for lunch?
Right, thank you once again to Encik Agni Jeffrey Don. Right, I would like to remain on stage and once again like to invite both Chris and Judy to join Encik Agni for photo opportunity. And meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, all right, Before we wait for lunch, just a quick reminder to validate your parking coupon. And of course, for our moderator and panelists, we have prepared a special table for you to enjoy lunch. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, lunch will be served, and this is also a good time for you to actually networking with fellow delegates. And of course, we are also excited to share with you at lunch. And of course, please make yourself or make your way to boardroom number 3, and we will see you back at 2:15.